I'm building a workbench that doesn't need drawer slides because they're expensive and I don't want to pay for them. And I decided to totally disassemble my favorite folding workbench to do it. Oh, and this bench is for a specific tool that I think will change everything. Yeah, this is exactly what this place needed. Here is the lightweight folding workbench that I built a little while ago, and I'm basically destroying it. But I'm repurposing a lot of the parts for a stationary workbench with a 1.5 inch tabletop instead of the 3/4 inch tabletop, so it can be beefier and withstand the weight of a new tool, which I'll get to in a minute, that weighs about 100 pounds. I'm also planning on adding storage to the bottom of this because I can never have enough storage. And even though this folding workbench wasn't as robust as the workbench I'm building now, I still think I may have overbuilt it just a tad. Oh yeah, that's right. I glued it on. That's fun. Here's a little glimpse into the space I'm working with, and the size of my workshop presents some challenges. Earlier that day. So here is my wood shop, but this is not the entirety of my garage. This is a 1-car garage space, and then behind it is an additional 2-car garage space, which is used primarily for cars and non-woodworking storage, which doesn't make sense, I know, but I'm slowly remedying that. My new laser is going to go in this area here, specifically this spot right there next to the door. And you may be thinking to yourself, there's already a cabinet there. Well, I'm going to move that cabinet over to there. I'm gonna shift this fridge over to the right a little bit and then put the laser there next to the door so that I can easily vent out all the bad stuff that comes out of the laser when I'm using it. The monkey is out of the bag, as they say, and the reason I'm building this workbench is for a CO2 laser I got from Xtool. I'll be using the laser differently than what I see a lot of people using it for, and the specific project that I'll reveal at the end is something that I've never seen on YouTube, which is shocking to me. I need to make the tabletop the same length and width as the legs because that's the main component that I'm keeping from the folding workbench. So it will still be 2 foot by 4 foot, but I'm gluing 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood together to make it 1.5 inches thick. A little tip on quote-unquote clamping pieces this big together. I'm using screws, and then once the glue dries, I'll be taking the screws out so I can reuse them, and you won't see the holes because they'll be on the underside of the tabletop. The next day. I'm not the first person to do this, but I'm definitely the second. I'm in my workshop a lot, so when I put things in my shop, mostly shop furniture, it's kind of my thing, I try and make it look really nice because having nicer things around me makes me happier and puts me in a better mood. So do I need a white oak border with mitered corners around this tabletop? No. But do I need it? Yes. Because I'm keeping the legs and what we'll call the back base from the old workbench, I needed to make sure that the size of the tabletop was an exact match to those pieces. Maybe it's because I had a cheap miter saw for 4 years, but I was actually surprised that my new miter saw can cut pretty dang perfect miters, and I think you can hear it in my voice. Nice. That's actually pretty good. Okay, I'll take it. For some reason, I thought it would be a good idea to raise up the tabletop to glue on the border pieces. Don't ask me why. So here's a few seconds of basically a comedy skit of me trying to get it done. And I finally figured out this was a bad idea. When I shared that I was going to be taking apart the folding workbench on my Instagram, I had some people reach out and tell me that I should keep the workbench, that I shouldn't take it apart. But what I don't think they know is that my shop is 198 square feet, so it's pretty small. And I had 3 workbenches in my shop at the same time until just a few minutes ago when I took apart the workbench. Now I have 2 benches, and I don't even think I need 2. So if I were to take apart one of my other workbenches, let me know in the comments what you would like to see me build with those pieces. To make this stationary, I'm attaching the upper and lower 2x4 stretchers using something pretty revolutionary: screws. Specifically pocket hole screws, and I love using pocket hole screws on shop furniture, specifically when those screws will not be visible because I think they're kind of ugly. For some reason, when I started woodworking, I thought nails would be used a lot, or at least a little bit, but I've never used them in any of my projects. One thing I didn't really focus on when attaching the legs to the base here is how square the legs were, and it came back to bite me in the bum later in the project. As you can probably tell by now, I build things. Apparently, it's mostly workbenches, but I build other stuff too, I swear. And what I don't do is mess around with CNCs or 3D printers or lasers. And so I was very curious when I got this laser how easy it would be to set up and actually use. And I'll show how I use it in a little bit, but I won't make you wait for the answer. Spoiler alert, it's pretty gosh darn easy, excuse my language. Attaching the base to the tabletop was pretty easy. Here I go with all the screws again. But what I did use were some L brackets with slots cut in them for wood movement. And although they weren't really necessary for this workbench, I could see myself using them for projects in the future like a dining room table. Here's a little inside scoop into what's going on in a lot of woodworking YouTube videos. Let me show you something. If you move the camera 2 inches to the left, or 50.8 millimeters, you'll see a big mess. But a lot of people want to keep that off camera to make it a cleaner video. And for me, if you move it even more to the left, you see my wife's car, and you see that I've had to move pieces of furniture and equipment outside of my main shop to make it a little cleaner in my wood shop. So if you're a woodworker and you're like, my shop is never as clean and tidy as the woodworkers on YouTube, just know our shops are not always as pristine as they seem. And that's what I thought when I started woodworking and watching YouTube videos, but sometimes it's just good old-fashioned camera angles and editing. For the lower storage, I cut some rabbets and dados for the main carcass, but what I noticed when I put the bottom piece on the workbench, there wasn't a lot of support from the workbench base. So I added some support pieces to handle the weight, and then I realized that the back diagonal cross brace was going to get in the way of assembly, so I remedied that in the most fun way possible. Yeah, just like the small tabletop piece, I added glue to this piece as well. I cannot tell you how satisfying that was. Actually, I can. It was really, really satisfying. This was actually a fairly mild glue up in terms of stress level. I just needed to double up on some clamps because I didn't have any long enough for the length of the lower storage compartment, which reminds me I really do need to get some 48-inch clamps. I am so excited about this new drawer building method, which I learned from Drew Witt, and his channel is Wittworks, because you don't need drawer slides, and I'm going to be using this strategy a lot more in the future. I just used pocket holes for the drawer box, and now I'm lining up the center of the drawer box with the center of the drawer bottom. I'm using wood glue and recessed screws to attach the bottom to the box. And then you'll notice that the bottom is slightly wider than the drawer box, and that, along with some plywood pieces I'm attaching to the lower cabinet, will act as the drawer slides for these drawers. You'll see this in a minute when I'm done with these drawers, but generally speaking, I like to recess my drawer faces about 1/8 of an inch into the cabinet. And this does a few things. It adds depth to the cabinet, which I think looks nice. It also fixes squareness issues and makes it less noticeable if my cabinet's not square. And also, when I try to make the drawer faces perfectly flush with the cabinet sides, if I'm off even just a little bit, it ends up looking kind of bad. But if you're able to make your drawer faces perfectly flush with the cabinet, then go for it. I use playing cards to get an even reveal, which I like to be about 1/8 of an inch. And then I secure the drawer face to the drawer box using some screws. And those screws will be in the exact position where the drawer handle will be. Then 4 screws to permanently secure the drawer face. And to be clear, this is the only method that works. There is no other method that will work. I'm joking, of course, but sometimes keyboard warriors will try to convince you that that statement is true. I know people don't always do this, but I always put one coat of finish on my shop furniture because it really brings out the color of the wood. So I'm pretty much done with the workbench, and on the lower cabinet, the right side looks pretty good, but on the left side, in the back, there's a pretty sizable gap, and I've thought a lot about what I should do with it. When I originally built this as the folding workbench, there was no lower cabinet, so the legs didn't need to be perfectly square, and that's the reason that I'm running into this issue now. I've thought about putting some white oak border pieces. One would be here, which would cover the gap, and the other two would be in the back and on the other side, and that would solve the visual issue of the gap. But ultimately, I decided to just leave it because I thought that white oak border piece would be a little much and actually make it look worse. So sometimes the best solution is to do less. And in my opinion, if doing less makes something better, that's pretty much the jackpot. One really cool thing about the laser I got, which is the X-Tool P2, is that it comes with a fire safety kit so that if a flame is detected while the laser is running, it will automatically put out that flame. And as I always say, the less fire in the shop, the better. I am always saying that. So how am I going to use this laser differently in my shop? Well, although you'll see me make some signs in a little bit, and a lot of people use lasers for sign making, I want to use the laser specifically to enhance my woodworking projects, not be the woodworking project, if that makes sense. For example, I'll add a design to the lid of a wooden bowl that I'll turn on my lathe, or I'll engrave a piece of leather that will be the bottom of a wooden and brass TV tray. This particular laser was really easy to set up, and the software that X-Tool uses is super user-friendly. If I can get this laser cutting and engraving quickly, then literally anybody can. My first project was engraving a super cool catchphrase into a piece of basswood, and then I ran a test grid, which is included in the software, to see the exact speed and power I need to use for hickory. Let's see if you can figure out who this is before the project is done. I like to say he's America's, nay, the world's father figure. And to me as a new dad, he's really a role model. I'll put an affiliate link in the description below to this laser if you're interested in getting one. And if you have any questions about it, just comment, or you can send me an email and I'll put my email in the description as well, or send me a message on Instagram at thomas.customwoodworks. If you do make any signs, I would recommend the 3/8 inch keyhole bit, which is what I used on the back of this sign. For those who don't know, this is Bob Belcher, father of 3, who owns a burger joint called Bob's Burgers on the coast of New Jersey. Is using a laser real woodworking? I've thought about this question a lot, and my short answer is yes. If you're using it on wood or to enhance your woodworking projects, then it absolutely is. But it's really a bad question because it's negative in nature. Just go out there and create whatever you want, regardless of what other people think, and remember to be kind and be awesome.